Welcome back to another episode of the Bonsai Jungle. On this episode, I'm going to be decandling my Japanese black pine. Before I get started, I figured it would be a good idea to mention some of the pruning and styling techniques on pines, because I remember when I bought my first Japanese black pine, I kind of took a look at it. I saw the way that the new growth was coming out in these candles, or the buds as they call them, and it was kind of confusing because I'm like, well, you don't really have branches, you have needles, and then you've got buds. How am I supposed to prune and shape a tree like this? But it's actually very easy. All you need to know is how this species of tree grows and how to manage the growth to get it shaped how you want it, which seems like a complicated, beating around the bush type of answer for the explanation. So let me be more direct when I zoom in and explain the branch structure here. All right, so how do we manage foliage on a Japanese black pine? Well, you gotta think about how the tree grows. So you got the trunk and the branch, and then all of these needles. And then what the tree does is it produces buds. All of them at the end of the branch have some buds, which are typically going to be the most vigorous ones. They emerge in what are called candles, and then eventually these just harden into the new little foliage clumps like you see all throughout the tree. Now this is very young material, so what I thought I would do is bust out my book and kind of show you an example of, in more mature specimens, what you're left with is just all these little clumps of foliage, the little candles that were allowed to grow, and then once you have enough of them, like let's say, 30, 40, 50 of these little individual candles growing, then you can start making a branch. And this is a Japanese black pine, so hopefully that gives you kind of a more clear idea of how you build a foliage pad on the end of your branch. So looking at something like this, you can see we have the branch growing out here, and then what we do, or what I could do, is cut it here, and then we get smaller subsequent candles growing on the interior. And then, like I said, once you have enough of them, you can start building a foliage pad here and then wire them into place. So hopefully that demystifies a little bit about how to style a Japanese black pine. All right, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, remove the dominant candles on each of these branches here, most of them. And what I mean by this is, if you look at a section like here, you can see there's a small little candle, a large candle, and another small candle. So we're going to remove the most large and dominant one, which only leaves the smaller ones behind. So those are going to be the ones that stay and get refined. And of course, like I said, this pushes the growth further back on the branch. So we're going to have a smaller foliage pad forming in here. Now, if I wanted the final size of the branch to be more extended out here, I could leave the candle, but in proportion to a very small tree like this, we don't really need any more elongating growth on the branches. We just need it compact in here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that candle. And basically you follow it all the way down to the bottom and cut it off as close as you can to the bottom of the branch. The next thing I'm going to do is, on this bottom branch here, I'm going to remove, obviously the most large and dominant bud here. So there you just have those side buds, or the side candles left, and that's hopefully going to encourage the back budding. If we took everything off, that would promote even more back budding. So, I'm kind of tempted not to leave it to 3. I may just leave it to 2. We might get some more back budding closer to this end anyways, but hopefully that is going to encourage the back budding here. And for the bottom branch, we're going to leave that alone and see where the new growth emerges now. Towards the back of the tree, we have this branch here, and there's really not a whole lot of work to do. As you can see, the foliage back here is already kind of small. We have a number of these candles already, and I think after this has hardened off for the fall and winter, we can already style this into a foliage pad. And this is kind of almost the bare minimum where I would want the foliage pad extending back here. So after we wire it, we may also let it grow a little bit next year. And what you can do is you don't have to take the entire candle off. For example, I could just take my fingers or those very tiny scissors and cut it off about halfway. And these needles that are left behind are still going to be alive, and then you can get more back budding happening around there and new smaller branches emerging from that point. So that's another thing to keep in mind when styling these trees. So what I'm going to do on this back branch is cut off a lot of the needles towards the base of this branch. This is going to be basically the sacrifice branch that I cut off later, and I'm just going to utilize the smaller buds back there. All right, so now we can focus all of its energy on elongating this growth so we get the most growth at the end of the branch here, thickening this small little branch up as fast as possible. And like I said, maybe in 2 years, we're going to come back here, cut this completely off, and then just with the buds that are left back in here that are also going to be growing over time, we're going to make the foliage pad. Now, another thing that's going to happen is since this is receiving the majority of the nutrients, it's going to lead to the foliage back here not getting as much, and that's going to be by default a little bit smaller and more refined. So as that develops, we're going to have a nice small foliage pad here waiting for us once we cut off the sacrifice branch. So believe it or not, we're mostly done. We have this where we want it cut off, and now we're going to see if it back buds here. It will. We're going to see where it back buds. This branch, it's kind of weird. It's kind of a little bit more yellow, and the buds, the candles aren't as strong as they are elsewhere on the tree. I'm not sure if the wire was biting in or if some kind of fungal disease started. I mean, you get these rings, these brown rings around some of the needles on the pines. So I've been treating that with fungicide to hopefully eliminate any kind of, fungus inside of this tree's system. We'll see how that works. The other branches back here, this one is about the size I would want it. We're going to leave all that foliage until I can style it in the fall, and we're going to make the foliage pad down here. This one is the one that I just cut off. Again, like I said, that's going to be the sacrifice branch to thicken this branch. Up here, I took, the most dominant candles out, and we're left with kind of a nice foliage pad developing in this area. So we're going to leave the rest of that alone, and we're going to see if we get back budding, and then eventually we're going to take all these long needles out. And then that just leaves us with the apex of the tree. This section is already nice and small. I can kind of take that out to refine it, but I think I want a branch that kind of grows out into here and develop a foliage pad, maybe towards the front of the tree, something like that. So that just leaves us with the apex. What am I going to do for the apex? Well, we have kind of an ugly scar here, so I want to get this back branch thickened as fast as possible so it grows kind of smooth with this section here. So we're going to leave the most dominant candle, but there is a secondary one, and we don't really need two of them to be competing. What I'm going to do is remove this one, and what that is going to do is allow some of the back budding on here, so hopefully we get smaller branches growing off the side, and we can start developing another foliage pad in this area as the sacrifice branch grows onwards and eventually gets cut off, and we'll already have maybe possibly the new apex right there. So that concludes this episode with the Japanese cork bark pine. We're going to see how the new foliage develops now and hopefully get some more back budding on the interiors of these branches. But that's going to be, like I said, what I do for now, waiting for the next step of development with this pre-bonsai. As always, good luck with your bonsai, good luck with your plants, and I'll see you in the next one.